Hi, Albrech. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Good to see you, Callum.
And you too. It's great to obviously learn a bit more about the business and kind of get to know you a little bit better in the run up to the discussion today. So I'm really excited to talk to you and also to obviously dive into the topic that we're going to go through today, which is obviously the EU ETS and OceanScore kind of platform and how you help your customers. So if you don't mind, why don't you start by introducing yourself and kind of a little bit about how you got into the world of shipping and a bit about your background.
Sure. So my name is Albrecht Grell. I'm one of two managing directors of OceanScore. My life in shipping, I would say, started in 2007, so 17 years ago now, when I joined the then still existing class society Germanischer Lloyd, which later merged with DNV to become DNVGL and now actually is DNV. Most of the years in DNVGL, I was serving the shipping community by running their global maritime advisory businesses, their advanced engineering and software units. And then later I shifted a bit towards innovation and digital solutions. And from there, the transition to OceanScore is a pretty natural one.
Yeah. No, I mean, it sounds fascinating, your background you've got as well in M&A, investments and projects. So it sounds like you've got quite a varied route to shipping. I can see that you founded some business as well in the past. So
True.
How did you first hear about shipping?
Really, more or less by accident. I had worked in consumer goods in my real early history, so to say. And the owner of the company I worked for those days had gotten into shipping. I had by then left that original company, but he heard about me leaving what I was doing then and called and said that I would like to join him in Germanischer Lloyd.
Yeah.
Didn't know much about shipping then, but I liked the guy, I liked the idea, I liked the industry. So I said yes, and here I am, 17 years later.
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of, I think once you get into the world of shipping, I guess mainly by the connections you make and the people you meet and things, you kind of stay in it pretty much. I mean, my family have been in it for 60 plus years or so. So you kind of, it takes a hold of you, which is in a good way. You get to travel a lot.
Yeah, it lives off the people. I think you need to be internationally minded, which I am very much. But the diversity of people you meet, the interesting discussions you have around all kinds of topics, the always changing patterns in the way shipping evolves, it's just a hugely interesting industry. So I really love being here.
Yeah, and it sounds like, we'll get onto it in a moment, but it sounds like you're speaking to quite a diverse range of stakeholders and customers and things. So it'd be interesting to learn about that. But at the moment, obviously, EU ETS is a huge topic and lots of press about it. I've read some really interesting articles you've shared. The latest, I think, was called, the A to Z of EU ETS, I think it's called. A featured article I saw. So if you don't mind, for me and for a number of other people, perhaps you could just give a quick overview of what it is. And obviously, I know it came into place at the start of this year, but your overview of what the policy involves.
Yeah, I mean, very, very quickly saying, the EU has started a project to rid Europe of carbon emissions by 2050. And one of the major parts of that policy is to introduce a cap and trade system for carbon emissions, meaning that the EU defines how many carbon emissions are allowed every year. They reduce that number year by year by year. And industry has to buy these emission credits, carbon credits, or EUAs, in order to be able to allowed to emit carbon. This is called the ETS, the emissions trading scheme or emissions trading system that the EU has established, as they want to simply put a price tag on emissions, but rather not doing this via a tax, but putting a limited number of emission credits into the market, and then the market having to fight for it, so to say, like in a real market, and prices going up or down. The idea is make emissions more expensive and make alternatives to emissions, so energy efficiency related measures or new fuels, more viable. That's an old scheme in the market since quite a few years, but shipping has been brought into it as of January 1st, 2024.
And does it just, this is going to me sound a bit naive, but does it just apply to EU member ship owner nations, or if they travel in certain EU regions? What is the impact for people from the Far East or the US? Does that also apply to them?
Yeah, the EU has actually done a very good move, and it's a very smart way of setting up a regulation like this. It affects everyone trading to European ports. So it doesn't matter who the owner of the vessel is, it doesn't matter who's the manager or what flag the vessel flies. Everyone is affected in the same way. And as soon as you start to hit European ports with your vessel, you have to pay for the emissions you cause.
Okay.
Roughly 40% of all carbon credits, so of all emission costs in shipping, will have to be carried by non-European ships.
And the EU has obviously they do, a specific body that is now collecting the payments for those carbon credits and things. Is that right?
Yeah, as always, there's a very complex set of organizations and authorities behind this. But yeah, that has all been well designed. The carbon credits are emitted by the EU and limited by the EU, but they are collected by the member states. So actually the revenues generated through this scheme largely land in the member states and not in the EU.
Okay. Okay. Sorry. Good. Thank you very much. And I guess the kind of the main stakeholders that are involved, who are they? If we talk in terms of shipping, who are you mainly speaking to in terms of your customers and the people that this will mainly impact?
In shipping, it's basically three groups, right? It's the operators, so those who actually sail the vessels, like Maersk, like Hapag-Lloyd.
Mm-hmm.
The EU has said the principle is the emitter pays. So they are running the vessels, they are transporting the cargo, so they have to pay for the emissions. They carry the cost and have to make sure that they can pass it on to the cargo that they transport. That's group number one. Group number two is the owners of the vessels. The EU has said the owners have to finally surrender the carbon credits back to the EU, which means they have as owners to collect these carbon credits from the operators who have to pay based on the EU regulation, which means there's a kind of an invoicing process happening between the owners and the charterers of the vessels, which means while the charterers carry the cost, the owners carry the risk of this actually not being paid for by the operators, so they have to make sure this all works in their favor. And then the third group is the vessel managers or the ISM companies. They're often kind of in between those two groups. They work on behalf of the owners. And if they are involved, it's the owner's choice. But if the manager is involved, then the manager will run all the related processes, which means he has to deal with all the complexity. And our target group is typically the last two. It's the owners who have the risk and the managers who have to manage the complexity. For the operators, while they have to carry the cost, life is actually a bit easier.
Okay, sorry, that makes sense. Okay, so, all right. So, and what role does OceanScore have? How do you help your customers?
Well, the process actually calculating how many emissions you have emitted is an old thing in shipping, right? So that's been done for many years, latest since 2018 when the MRV regime was entered into force in Europe, the measurement, reporting, and verification of emissions. So that is well established. And done by verifiers, by ship shore reporting providers, all that. And it roughly works like that for ETS as well. So the challenge is not on assessing how many emissions you have or how many EUAs you have to contribute. The challenge is really the complex process between owners, managers, and charterers. This happens based on the so-called charter parties between the owners and the charterers. And they differ ship by ship. Some charterers say they contribute or will provide EUAs, so carbon credits to the owners upon request. And some can't do that. Maybe there are Asian charterers who don't have access to EUAs, which means they will provide cash or funds. Some will do this on a monthly basis, some on a quarterly basis. For some customers, you might prepayments. And all this is really, really complex. It looks easy at first glance. But if you think 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 months down the road with disputes, with disruptions, with discussions, with new charter parties coming in, it's very easy to lose oversight or to lose transparency in this. And if the owner loses transparency, he runs a complete risk of actually having to pay the EU without getting payment from the operator. And that's where we help. So we're stepping in to help them make sure that these processes can be managed in an efficient way and that they retain, I would call it 360-degree transparency throughout the whole process.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. And who is your main internal stakeholders? Are they the chartering managers for the ship owner, or the voyage manager, or the owner? How does it work?
Well picked. Typically, it would be the chartering manager, because the complexity, as we discussed, sits in that relationship between the owner and the charterer to really make sure that you get in a consistent way the EUAs you request from the charterer. So we typically propose that the chartering managers take care of this process.
Okay, and are you ever involved in a point where a chartering manager is looking to fix a ship kind of live? Are you ever involved in those calculations in terms of the carbon impact, or is it more kind of a methodical kind of planning sort of process?
Well, our tools allow you to simulate the carbon costs, so to say, for certain voyages or periods, right? So that obviously is helpful when discussing, and we on a more systematic way, I would say. And we are being approached by our customers, but I think that is typically happening in the beginning of these new regulations because they are so complex. We are approached by many of our customers who simply ask for advice. They are in discussions with the charterer. They have three options on how to do, how to conclude the ETS clause in the charter party, and they come to us and say, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? How should I do this? Not sure that we always know the truth, to be honest, but we certainly have talked to lots of people. We are the market leaders in ETS management with more than 70 customers around, so we see a lot what's going on.
And obviously, it's only been introduced not that long ago. So what has the kind of the shift been, or the kind of, I guess, the feedback and the challenges since it was launched in the start of the year?
It's been, I would say, from our perspective, extremely intense. You know, shipping, Callum. I mean, there is a certain tendency with many to wait it out until the very last minute. So if we've been overwhelmed in January with customers kind of trying to come on board very last minute, and we continue to be overwhelmed now in February, heading towards March, with customers who said they could do it themselves and then realized it's a bit too complex. So for us, it's been mayhem. But if you look at it from a customer perspective, and we keep hearing this question, is shipping prepared and how ready are they and all that, the whole environment we operate in is not prepared. I mean, shipping is not master of the universe. We operate within a certain regulatory and technical environment. And if you see that the last implementing acts by the EU were only published in December, that BIMCO was extremely late in proposing their charter party clauses and their shipment clauses, which should be the basis for shipments and for charter parties. If you then see that administering authorities were only allocated to shipping companies in January, so like 31 days after it actually started to be enforced, this regulation, and when you then try to open a union registry account to deposit your EUAs, you were told by the institutions that they were actually not ready for it yet, and you couldn't open your account. So I would say that it is complex. This whole process landscape between owners and managers and operators has to be readjusted. But the real challenge is the completely unprepared environment around shipping. It's tough enough for European managers and owners. It's nearly impossible for those who are coming from further away. If you're a South American or an Asian owner, you don't sail to Europe a whole lot, and suddenly you're faced with all this unpreparedness of the environment. It's really tough.
Has your team internally changed more from a kind of a consultative sort of sale and kind of outreach to now a bit more transactional kind of, as you said, you mentioned maybe a year or so ago, it was more kind of educating about what's coming up, and now it's here. It's like, okay, now let's just fix things and let's get people onboarded. Would you say it's changed it, or has it been a bit more of a natural kind of progression?
Well, it's changed in a natural way, I guess. I mean, it has been very sales and product demo type stuff we did last year. It moved then into a bit more consultative approaches. And I would say that currently there's a lot of bug fixing and problem solving out there. I'll give you an example. I said that emissions calculation and emissions assessment done by verifiers is an old thing. So there's nothing new to that. It's around since MRV regime days. But ETS has established a few small differences. There's suddenly a definition of transshipment ports for container ships that aren't there in the MRV regime. Okay. Or there are definitions around so-called outermost regions and how they are being considered in the ETS regime. There's a difference between commercial voyages and MRV voyages. And many of the verifiers have not reflected these changes in their technical solutions. So a large chunk of what we are doing is sitting with customers and then going through the reports they're getting through our system from the verifiers or from the data providers, trying to figure out what they actually mean and how they need to be corrected to make sense when they request EUAs for their charterers. I hope that this will be resolved in the next 2 or 3 months, but currently we're extremely busy with that.
Okay, and that leads me on nicely to the next topic. And I mean, when you're speaking to the ship owners or occasionally the charterers as well, what sort of strategies are you recommending to them in terms of managing their data to be prepared, essentially?
Yeah, there would be a big difference between charterers and owners/managers. I would say that in the last 4, 5, 6, 7 years, the need to have good quality data in a well-structured, accessible format, sitting somewhere that can be shared, has been long there, especially on the charterer side who paid for the bunker, and has been there largely for the performance management to reduce your bunker consumption. That is now changing, right? So with the ETS regime, suddenly there's a cost of not having your data act together to the owner or manager on his behalf as well. So it's all about how do you make sure data comes from ship to shore? How do you assure the quality in that data? There is tons of rework always needed with noon reports. How do you make sure this happens fast and in an efficient way? You can't wait until year end now anymore. Yeah. Where is the data stored? How do you provide access to this data via APIs to your business partners like OceanScore, like a verifier, etc.? That's reasonably new to many of these, especially smaller owners. And there needs to be a lot of focus on that. We are partnering with quite a few of these data providers. So a layer, so to say, in parallel or below the verifiers, data providers, performance management solutions providers like StormGeo, like Secotech. And they're doing a fantastic job, I would say, currently helping owners to get data quality and data processes up to speed. And if we're being asked, I strongly advise owners these days to try to do this with Excel anymore. I think the days of Excel and data management are long gone. And for the owners, latest since Jan 1st this year with ETS coming.
So do you have also a data platform where you can kind of help people structure it in a certain way? Is that part, or is it more through recommendation of your partners and things?
I think there's a lot of very professional players, I mentioned too, in the market to do this with added purposes. I'm not sure that data management should be seen as something standalone just for its own sake. But if you combine the good quality data management with a solid performance management solution and combine that then with a solid ETS management solution like we are providing, I think then it makes sense. So data management, data quality, not for its own purpose, but really to drive something that is relevant for the performance of a company.
And if a ship owner or a ship management company isn't kind of adopting digital, the latest technologies and things, I mean, what sort of challenges do you think they're facing?
Let's just focus on the ETS management, right?
Okay, sure.
So just a very simple example. You are the owner and manager of a vessel and you need to request EUAs from your charterer, which means you're pulling data from the vessel, typical noon reports, event reports. You're analyzing these to extract the number of EUAs you need, and then you send an email to the charterer saying, hey, I need 352 EUAs from you. The charterers will be typically pretty well set up, and they'll turn around and say, no, number's wrong, I think it's only 342. So if your data is not in good shape, you're going to run into disputes. You're not going to get potentially not getting any EUAs then. And you're going to have a hell lot of work and time spent on trying to figure out whether it's 342 or 352. So data quality assures that what you are doing towards the charterer happens in a seamless and straightforward way, in an efficient way. And it later secures when you're passing this data to the verifier to identify the number of EUAs to be surrendered to the EU. This actually matches with what you have gotten from the charterer. And if you compare the cost of that, I mean, you can be off by just a few percent. If you have improper data management, the cost of that is always going to be higher than putting in place a solid data management facility once and for all. And again, I would say that this is where you get professional partners on board. Don't do it yourself anymore. That's long gone.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. So if we look more at your team and your kind of, I guess, outlook in terms of the EU ETS kind of topic, I mean, it's very complex and certainly, obviously, it's new. So when you're hiring either for your team or maybe kind of any kind of business that's focusing in this area, do you think it's really important that people have former knowledge of this area, or do you think it can be kind of taught, or are you kind of learning as you go along as kind of things evolve as well?
Well, I mean, it depends on who you are as a company. If you were like, huge organization, let's like say DNVGL where I used to work, right? Then it's fully okay to onboard people who have no knowledge of shipping and there's an infrastructure there to train them up and bring them up to speed over time. I mean, we're a small organization. We're like 25 men strong, men and women strong. We don't have that luxury. So in my team, everyone has to have a shipping background. There's just no way around it. I couldn't see a customer calling and asking a question about the charter party, and the party and our person on our side would think this is something about a festive event with dancing. No, a charter party is a contract. Or if someone calls about bunker and you think it's a military building to protect someone, right?
Yeah.
I think you need to understand the language. That's number one. And number two is shipping is complex. It takes time to understand the difference between time charter and voyage charter and spot, between charterers, managers, owners, operators. What is the difference? What works? What doesn't work? And I mean, we are in the market since 2.5 years now. We're getting up to speed very fast. We're working with tons of customers day in, day out. And I believe that if you want to be in shipping, you better be shipping. So yeah, we have everyone in our team, even down to the office manager, has a shipping background.
Interesting. Okay. Awesome. All right. Is there anything else you'd like to share about OceanScore, in particular, how you either your platform or how you serve your customers or anything else at all?
I mean, I could do this like very quick sales pitch.
Sure. Yeah.
And I would basically say, if you're a manager or an owner of vessels, and if you feel that ETS is complex, then just talk to us. Just, reach out and check whether we can be adding value to you. We believe, and the fact that we are leading in the market by now shows that our customers see that as well, that we can actually make ETS management as simple as it can be, given that it's a complex regulation, but we can really simplify the processes for you. And we can de-risk it by making sure that you're constantly transparent around all the data flows, around the processes, about the EUA movements on account, off account, and all the open positions. Talk to us. I mean, it's always an interesting exchange. There are customers where I say, nope, I don't think we add value to what you do because you're already well set up. But in more cases than not, it's going to be a deeper discussion.
Yeah. Okay. And is your model mainly software as a service, or is it more consultative, kind of bespoke projects? How does
Purely software as a service.
Okay.
So we have a pure subscription model based annually per ship that sails Europe. The consulting is part of it. I mean, you can't have a customer and then tell them, I don't talk to you if you have a problem, right? So we will always consult our customers, but the business model is purely software as a service.
Okay, awesome. All right, well, thank you so much for coming on the show and obviously sharing all your insights. I would like to ask one more question. As far as obviously your role as a managing director, I like to try and always kind of pick one particular topic or role function per episode we talk about. So can you just give a quick overview of what your role is day to day as a managing director of the business, and perhaps, I don't know, maybe how it differs from a CEO or another sort of C-suite type of function?
Well, I would say the difference between managing director and CEO is only the title. What we have in OceanScore, we have 2 MDs, so you can't have 2 CEOs, but basically that's the same. what I'm doing day in, day out is largely taking care of customers. I love engaging with customers. I think we are in a really interesting industry, and I haven't picked it by accident. So I spend half of my day engaging with customers directly or indirectly. And most of the other half is spent with my team, because being available for them to answer questions, trying to help them, trying to coach them, trying to help them reach new levels, bringing them together to exchange ideas, that's the other really fun half part of my job. Unfortunately, I don't have to do much with accounting and stuff like that. That's not really my hobby, so we have people to do that. That's the beauty of my role here.
Yeah, I saw a recent, I don't know if it was a Christmas photo or a recent photo of your team having a big lunch and everything, and everyone looks pretty cheery, and it looks like a nice group of, I don't know if they're all developers or they were, but yeah, it looks like a really interesting team you've got there.
That was last week. I was in Poland. We have our development team based in Poland.
Cool.
It's up to 12, 13 people now. And they are a fantastic bunch. I mean, not only from their competence and their dedication, but they're just fun to be with. Yeah. And I really enjoy sitting with them, cracking problems, browsing ideas, and then having dinners and one or the other beer with them as well.
Great. Okay. And if anyone would like to reach out to you, obviously to learn more about OceanScore or yourself, what's the best way for them to do so?
I mean, we are very digital, but I'm kind of old school, so just give me a call. And you could reach out via LinkedIn, via email, our homepage. But certainly I will call back. So I think shipping is still a people-to-people business. I like to take it personal, and we'll be very fast to get back.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really interesting. I know I've learned more about the EU ETS and obviously your business and what you're doing. So really, really valuable. Great. Well, if that's it for now, we'll wrap things up, and we'll catch up again soon.
Thank you very much. It's been a great pleasure.
You're very welcome.